will get started. Welcome to the VWBPE 2024 Mythic Origins. We so hope you've had a great day so far. And we'd like to welcome you to our first and very exciting conference keynote, Mythic's Origins of the Metaverse Myths. Say that 3 times. I sat on the edge of my seat recently at a presentation by this inspiring journalist and author. I most appreciated his very personal take on all that is happening in the metaverse. I'm pleased to introduce Wagner James Au, Hamlet Au. Second.
Hey, thank you. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, give me one more second, though. I want to say a couple more wonderful things about you.
well, but then continue, please.
And I would like to ask folks, if you have your mics on, to please turn them off. I think we just got that. Thank you, thank you. So James is the author of Making a Metaverse That Matters, based on his 20 years working in virtual worlds. A story he first started telling in the making of Second Life, based on his experiences as the first journalist officially embedded in a metaverse platform. His writing about virtual worlds has been featured in The Atlantic, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, and Wired, among many other publications. He has also spoken on the topic at Stanford, UC Berkeley, and Princeton, among many other universities. His blog, New World Notes, is the longest-running news site devoted to the metaverse. I found his newest book fascinating and know you will enjoy what he shares with us today. Let's give a warm welcome to our honored guest and keynote speaker, Wagner James Au.
Hey, thank you so much. That was an awesome intro. And hello, everybody. Looking at you all on your gorgeous rafts. We've got a Huckleberry Finn sort of mode going on, which I kind of dig. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, so Mythic Origins of Metaverse Myths, which is a tongue twister, as she said. But, yeah, this is going to be going through some of the myths that have emerged over the years, especially the last 3 years, as the Metaverse hype wave sort of got rolling very unexpectedly. I mean, I've been doing this, like she said, Ellie said, for 20 years, and so we pondered when I was at Linden Lab whether we should call Second Life a metaverse. And I remember Robert Harper, who was the head of marketing there, she's like, well, how many people have actually read Snow Crash? Like maybe 100,000, which is not that much, you know, in the big picture. So we kind of said, okay, we'll call it an online game for a while. Then sort of virtual world platform emerged because we wanted to get away from the game category because that kind of pigeonholed us. So, yeah, the metaverse as a concept, it's always been hovering above Linden Lab and Second Life, for example, but also other people have been interested in it. And so, yeah, the book is trying to capture kind of that culminating history that led up to where we are now. So, yeah, we'll go through some of these myths, and I'll leave some time for questions. If you have questions, I think you can just put them in text, and Ellie will select like 3 or 4, depending on time, based on hopefully the ones that are most generally interesting. So, yeah, let's go into myth 1. I hear this all the time. It pulls my very long hair out because I let my hair grow out during COVID. There's no such thing as the metaverse and no agreed-upon definition. I've seen this in countless news stories, articles, reports, even people who are working in virtual worlds will say this. And really, I kind of ask immediately, well, did you read Snow Crash? Because the founders of Roblox and Fortnite and, like I mentioned, Second Life, we all read Snow Crash. Someone put it to me this way, in the kind of early 90s, someone who had been around for a while, Snow Crash was kind of a presentation deck in the Valley. Like, you'd ask, well, what are you building? And people go, I'm building this, and they'd show them Snow Crash. But really, things get memory hold so quickly in recent years, especially with the crush of social media that's been so algorithmatized that we don't really have, I think, access as much to even recent history. I mean, Second Life hit its peak in 2007 or so, which is not that long ago. But yeah, there was kind of this sort of amnesia about it. But I like to say, well, if you read Snow Crash and look at the particulars of what Neil Stephenson describes in the novel, he's being very particular about what it is, and also, again, actual developers have been using it as a reference. Not going to do a one-to-one kind of concept. Like I remember when we were at Linden Lab, when I was still at Linden Lab, people were thinking about teleportation, and should we have point-to-point teleportation in 2003, 2004, and we actually said, well, in Snow Crash, you don't do that, because that's considered too jarring. It kind of breaks the immersion if suddenly somebody teleports like Star Trek all of a sudden in front of your face. But we decided, no, we're more like Philip decided, well, we should do that, like make it more of a direct teleportation. But again, the novel was referenced in that design discussion. So I made a definition that is, it'll fit in a tweet or an X. Well, I like to call it Twitter still. But yeah, the metaverse is a vast, immersive virtual world, simultaneously accessible by millions of people through VR and other devices. Other devices are very important. Highly customizable avatars, powerful experience creation tools, and it's integrated with the real-world economy and external technology. So real-world economy, in other words, there's some kind of currency. It could be, U.S. currency, but, like Linden dollars, or a currency or an economy that's connected to the real world. In other words, you can make money from your virtual content. And that external technology, this is very important, that, for example, you could hook it up to the web. That's kind of the most basic and easy way to hook up a virtual world. But that will go up to and including hook up the virtual world to a robot or to someone in a wheelchair or someone who is unable to move out of their bed. That was one of the things that inspired me in Snow Crash when I first read it as a kid. Was there's this guy who's profoundly disabled in Snow Crash, but he lives in the metaverse and he's hooked up to IVs and everything, and he's able to navigate the real world within the metaverse. He's in a mansion and he's looking at video screens on the mansion. He's like, oh, actually, I'm driving down Los Angeles highways while I'm hooked up into this kind of life support system. And I thought, wow, that's really amazing. This guy's still able to thrive as a human being and still have like kind of this whole world that he's interacting with people in. And yeah, that to me is also an important part of the aspect of it. And again, like I saw that in Second Life. Like one of the very first people I wrote about was her name was Wild Cunningham, was actually controlled by 9 individuals that would navigate the same avatar. They were all profoundly disabled in wheelchairs, but they would take a vote and their care worker would guide them through Second Life. So yeah, that's kind of the other thing. So there's not only a definition, but the metaverse as it's defined exists in a rough outline of what that definition is, and is also working. Like, it does have millions of people in it. Second Life, upwards of 1 million, but like I mentioned, Fortnite's Roblox were also influenced by Snow Crash, and those are huge. Fortnite has 100 million, Roblox has 350 million monthly active users, so it's actually larger than the U.S. in terms of people. So these are actually working, and they're actually having profound effects on people. A couple of people I started in the book, I mentioned this guy named Charles, who was a blues guitarist in his 80s, and I randomly discovered him in Second Life, or stumbled upon him, I should say, playing blues, and he's actually a blues guitarist in real life, old black dude in the South, and a friend brought him into Second Life to play. He was actually able to make tips playing live in Second Life on blues guitar well into his late 80s. I think he passed away in 92. But people like that are already having their lives profoundly influenced and changed by metaverse platforms that are successful. So that's important to address just first and foremost, that myth. Myth 2, is that popping up? Oh yeah, the metaverse requires VR. You'll see this anytime you see an article about the metaverse. 9 times out of 10, you'll see some dingling in a VR headset, or several people in a headset, like as the illustrative photo. And again, this is something that was implied by Snow Crash, but the author Neil Stephenson, he the next year after Snow Crash came out, he played Doom, the video game Doom, and on a flat screen, and he realized you can get an immersive 3D experience on a flat screen about as well as you can on VR. So he said right then that you don't really need a VR headset, and that somehow got missed by Meta. I think because Meta, and I talk about this in the book, the people at Meta really didn't use Snow Crash as a reference, even though they changed their literal name to Meta. Most of the people at Meta, the executives, their main reference is Ready Player One, which is a nice novel and everything, but it kind of didn't really add much to the original conception. But Ready Player One was more of a video game, and also it was very VR facing, and they kind of used that as a model, and they kind of, again, I feel like they short shrifted what Neil Stephenson was saying. And then there's another aspect, like I mentioned in this slide. Dana Boyd, she's a really well-known academic. She's also a senior researcher at Microsoft. And when Meta bought Oculus VR, the startup, she wrote a very powerful essay saying, is VR sexist? If inadvertently, because she went into research that she did that females overwhelmingly get nauseous in VR. And I talk over and over again with people in VR about this, and say, oh, it's because of the motion, and you just have to optimize the VR experience. But what Dana was discovering, she found some really fascinating research studying people who are trans, and as they're transitioning to male and they're taking male hormones, it actually changes how they process 3D images in their brain. So her argument is there could be a hormonal component to how we experience simulated VR. And that strongly implies that there's not a technical fix to that. It could be just on a hormonal level. So with VR, you most especially do not want to make that the main way for people to access the metaverse, because half the population is going to have a strong propensity to literally vomit. So that's another important thing to consider. So myth 3, and I love this one because I'm actually partly to blame for it. I should take the hit there. Myth 3, everyone will soon be in the metaverse. I mean, I'll give credit to Matthew Ball, who's a well-known VC, and he wrote the book, The Metaverse, but he started writing essays kind of reviving the concept of the metaverse back in probably 2020, right around the pandemic starting, 2019, saying that, you know, what was happening, he was seeing in Fortnite is really the kind of, and Roblox were literally glimmers of the metaverse emerging into like kind of a mass market. And as Roblox had an IPO with it, certainly when Meta became, well, it was Facebook, and then Facebook changed its name to Meta, then all of a sudden we had this whole, oh my God, the next big wave is going to be the metaverse, and everyone's going to go in the metaverse. And yeah, so, you know, Zuckerberg would say stuff like that. Like you see investors like Motley Fool, very well-known investor site, say, hey, 5 billion people are going to be in the metaverse by 2030, which is 6 years ago. I think we're arguably at almost 1 billion across many metaverse platforms, but yeah, 5 billion is still quite far away. But again, like, I'm at fault a bit because, you know, my first book, Making of Second Life, at the time I was super excited about Second Life's growth. I was like, wow, yeah, if this keeps growing, you know, this could replace the web. And I, you know, took a lot of lumps as we learned, and I cover a lot in the book that you know, when you really try to get the vast majority of people, not the vast majority of people, into a virtual world, most of them get overwhelmed. So basically, what I fall down on is it's probably going to be about 1 in 4 people that are the addressable market of people who would go into a metaverse platform and be interested in metaverse. That's basically people who are either they call themselves gamers or they're people who are comfortable with 3D experiences, which is typically gamers or people who are, and by gamers, I don't necessarily mean who only like Fortnite, but, like playing, fully 3D games on Nintendo Switch or even on their mobile phone. But that's the people who are going to enjoy that level of immersion. I call it the immersion funnel. A slight typo there. The immersion funnel, if you look at the numbers, the more and more immersive an experience it gets, the less people that use it. So if you look at the tiniest part of the funnel, that's people with VR. People with VR headsets, the active user base is probably about 10 million, because most people buy a VR headset and they play it for a while and they put it on their shelf. So actual active VR users, 10, 15 million. So that's tiny. And then you get outer and outer. You look at people who are in like PC games and console games, then that's more, half a billion. And then you get out to mobile, and then you got over 1 billion. So I think that's partly how we experience technology. The more immersive an experience becomes, the less you can do. Like right now, I'm in a 3D immersive virtual world, so I could go on my phone. It would be really distracting. I can't even, I know people, I can see people texting, or I can see my chat go across the screen. I can't even look at that because it'll be too distracting. You have to, in a 3D space, you have to kind of focus your attention a lot more. So that's part of the immersion funnel. It's just going to be a limit to how much information people can process all at once while in an immersive world. I mean, that's what makes them powerful, because when you are in one, you feel like you're really there and you're present, and that there are other people in the world and they are there, and that's great. But that is going to limit the amount of engagement most people want to have within them. Now, they might watch it on YouTube. Actually, that's a lot of the metaverse activity happens on YouTube and Twitch. Like this conference is being streamed onto YouTube, so you can watch it on YouTube while you're at work or you're on your phone or whatever. But that's where a lot of the activity, I think, in the future of the metaverse is going to be. It's going to be people who like there could be a reality show or a comedy show within a platform like Roblox or VR Chat. There already are, but they'll gain more audiences. That you don't necessarily have to get the whole immersive thing. You can just watch it on YouTube like any other TV show. So, the audience for people interested in metaverse content could be upwards of everybody, but I would not expect everyone to create an avatar and log in and all that. We've learned through the last 20 years that's very unlikely to happen. I'm getting some water here. So yeah, let's look at myth 4. The metaverse must be fully interoperable across many virtual worlds. I've seen this one quite a bit, actually, from people who are. This is more of an inside baseball conversation. In other words, people who are already fans of the metaverse and virtual worlds. That they'll say, "Well, it's great we have Fortnite here and Roblox here, Second Life here, VR Chat there, but we really need to interoperate that. We need to be able to teleport from one to the other." In fact, I just saw a demo last week with someone who, it's a startup that is trying to get past that, where you're just in one single shard, as they call it, thousands and thousands of people in the same virtual space. And I told them, well, really, because they're saying, well, it's hard to bring your friends if you can't bring them all into the same space. And I go, well, really, you're only saving 30 seconds if it's a large single shard world, because what happens practically, if you play in Roblox and you want your friends to join, like I play with my nephew, I go, hey, come over. I'll text them, say, hey, come join me in this server or that server. Give them the information, send them the entry code to Minecraft server, a Fortnite server, or whatever. But it's not that hard, really, to find people across sharded worlds. Now, that's one version of interoperability where it's just your user identity, so people know that, I could take my Hamlet Au avatar, and I could, it would be great if I log into VR chat and it'll say, "Oh, are you a Second Life user? If so, put in your user ID," and then you can link those accounts. That would be a nice interoperable option. I think it's worth shooting for. I don't know how much efficiency it's going to create. Again, we kind of are already used to transitioning to multiple platforms. I'm sure all of us have multiple social media accounts and are probably in multiple virtual worlds. So, interoperability, even on a personal or a social level, it's a nice to have. It's not necessarily, to me, a need to have. And then we get into the whole, can I bring the classic way of phrasing is, can I bring my magic sword from one world to the next? But this is almost a philosophical issue, that really the value of an item is only valuable to the community that first gives it value. So in other words, your magic sword in Elder Scrolls Online might be really valuable to the community of fellow Elder Scroll users, because they know how hard it was to get and earn, or even to, get enough experience points or gold points to purchase it. But that's going to be totally meaningless to other platforms. So on the deep philosophical level, interoperability of content just seems sort of a myth. And then that's even setting aside the technical aspects, because different platforms have different ways that they display mesh. They have different graphics engines. So all of that makes the idea of interoperability, of transferring content across platforms, really difficult. I mean, the Web3 folks, the people with the cryptocurrency, that's one of their key arguments as well. We can have blockchain to interoperate content or currency, but none of the Web3 platforms have really taken off. There's one called Decentraland and another one called the Sandbox. They have tiny user bases. Like, I never tire of telling them, look, not only do very few people use Bitcoin, actually more people use Linden dollars to buy goods and services, but these virtual worlds that are Ethereum based, they're much smaller than Second Life. Like, the amount of publicity the Sandbox and Decentraland get, when there's literally, last I saw, it was like 7,000 users at peak in Decentraland, which is teeny tiny. And I think the problem is this effort to integrate blockchain and cryptocurrency, because that immediately makes the world interesting for people who are into it for speculation. They're like, oh, if I own a plot in Decentraland, maybe it'll become super, super valuable. So they're more like real estate speculators. They're not there to form a virtual community. And that's actually one of my golden rules with Metaverse in the future, is when we build Metaverse platforms and we improve upon them, really anything that fosters community is what's important. Everything else is secondary. The money is secondary, because you're not going to make money as a company, certainly not as users, until you have a thriving community that is there on a regular basis, that enjoys each other's company, that finds value in it. So you can't start with an interoperable money as your main value proposition, as we say in Silicon Valley. It's got to be about community. It's got to be about fun. People are in there for fun. So going more into interoperability, because I think anyone, if you could raise your avatar hands, I'd say, do you remember OpenSim? Because OpenSim, the open source version of Second Life, they tried to interoperate with Second Life, and actually they did get the teleport part right, and Linden Lab did that with IBM. So one of the biggest tech companies in the world. I think they had some help from folks at Intel and NVIDIA, some others, to do interoperable metaverse. And so they tried it, and it kind of worked. But one thing that happened is content creators started worrying about their content getting ripped and then resold across various open sim worlds. So that was already a controversy. Secondly, again, the Second Life user, they're like, well, I already got my not only my stuff here, but my friends are here, my community's here, the events are here. So why would I necessarily want to go into another world that's going to be different, and there's people I don't know? So again, I've seen it firsthand, tried, and so we keep harping on this, like, kind of, it's almost like the dictatorship of the proletariat, like this theoretical utopia of interoperable avatars across multiple platforms. And it might work, but yeah, it's been tried, and I really didn't see that happening. I mean, my theory is Discord, if it really wanted to, could be the interoperable platform for multiple worlds, because that's already what happens. If you're in Discord, you'll be hanging out with friends and go, hey, there's a new Second Life event. Here's a link. Let's all go in. Or they might say, oh, well, there's a thing I'm doing in VR chat. Jump on in. So it's already easy to do that, and it could be that Discord and another platform becomes kind of the interoperable community, so to speak, for the metaverse. So here's another one. This is a favorite of mine, especially for Second Life. This is kind of very Second Life oriented. So this myth is the metaverse requires ultra-realistic human avatars. Again, I see this over and over again. There's multiple startups that are trying to make highly ultra-realistic avatars. Even Apple has kind of done that with their personas. They don't call it avatars because they're trying to steer away from kind of avatars and virtual worlds and so on. But there's an assumption that we want avatars that are ultra-realistic. And, we have some people want that, but we have a proof that it doesn't really move the needle, as we call it, in terms of users. Like, here's on this screen. On the left is what a Second Life, a really optimized, high quality avatar looked like in 2006, and then the one on the right, the big haired blonde on the right, she's an optimized avatar from a year or two ago. And these are, if you like that, that's great, and people enjoy that, and it's encouraged a really cool ecosystem of kind of like a fashion role playing in Second Life. But here's one thing that's happened. It hasn't really grown the user base. The user base is about the same as it was in 2007, about 500,000, 600,000, give or take. So, you see these avatars all over social media. So if they really appeal to a mass market, Second Life would have grown. And a lot of the problems with the user interface, if people really wanted to go, oh, I don't care, I want this. But you don't see a one-to-one relationship between realistic avatars and user growth. The biggest platforms, Roblox and Minecraft, they're actually kind of like Lego figures. They're blocky. And I talked at length in the book with a really great academic named Nick Yee, who wrote a book on virtual worlds, also worth looking up. And he talked about that. He said, well, really, people think of Roblox avatars and Minecraft avatars as being kind of too juvenile and rudimentary. And he said, but really, it's, mostly kids, but also, younger adults, they're exploring different aspects of their identity. And it encourages them to be creative, because creative by creating content within the world, because you can only customize your avatar so much, and you're not going to have a ultra realistic avatar. Well, Roblox introduced some realistic avatars, or more realistic avatars, but the kind of Lego-like default is still the most popular one. And we see that in Second Life too. It's I argue about this in my book, and we can discuss it in Q&A. But I would argue that as Second Life avatars became more realistic, there was less and less emphasis on creativity, like immersive world creativity, like the real interesting breakthrough. Like you think of like AM radio, the really amazing immersive art. Or someone made a whole ecosystem, an island that was an ecosystem, a working ecosystem, and like life experiment, like artificial life experiments. Just in 2006 or so, when avatars was still kind of rudimentary, that's when we had a peak of of creativity, user creativity. It was just because there was less emphasis on your avatar. I mean, and so the emphasis is on what you can create. And yeah, I would argue that that's been an impediment. And I think one way Second Life can get its mojo back, so to speak, is to, like, for example, when it's starting avatars, create some non-human avatars that are a default choice. So you don't necessarily have to be a beautiful, human avatar. And not even just there's furry option, but like robots, even an abstract avatar, because there's a lot of social barriers and social hierarchies that go along with being pretty, and that's something we call the Malibu effect. That as Second Life avatars became more realistic, Second Life, the virtual world, became more and more like Malibu. I talk about this in the book. Philip Rosedale and the other Lindens were very surprised about that. Like they built a virtual world. They had a totally open canvas. They, well, you can build whatever you want. But then people pretty immediately started building like Malibu beach houses by the ocean. And really, as Nick, you pointed out, it's really because if you have human avatars, you start unconsciously bringing your human prejudices and your human expectations with them to your avatar. So it's like, if you have a human avatar, well, then you need a house, right? Because you're a human. So you don't really need a shelter in a virtual world, but you have a human. Then you start thinking of clothes, and you think about, okay, well, my clothes look better than the other person's, or at least I want to look presentable. Then you start thinking about, improving your house, and then getting vehicles, and then all of a sudden we got runaway consumer capitalism in a virtual world, just from the option of having human avatars, attractive human avatars as a default. And this is not even getting to the racism aspect, because if you're a human avatar, and if you're African American in real life, are you going to choose to be black? You're going to suffer racism, or Hispanic, or Asian. So there's all these choices that are inherent with making human avatars the default. So it's something we have to be very cautious about, and also I think really need to scale back away from, to allow more creativity. I talk in the book about there's an upcoming metaverse platform by Genova Chen, who's a very famous game designer. His avatars is in a virtual world that he created. It's called Sky, Children of Light. They're not human. They look kind of like gray pixies, I guess you'd say. So they don't have a race, and they're not specifically human. That virtual world is huge. It's I think 20 million last I saw, and has a real interesting community. It's about gifting. People gift each other instead of making content to sell to make money. So yeah, definitely need to think about moving away from human avatars as a default. Checking how we're doing on time here. So yeah, some closing thoughts for educators. Give me. So, we're definitely using Second Life as a home base, and that's great because it's really the first virtual world to have a strong, large community of educators really take root. And I know a lot of that's because there's so many virtual campuses during the Second Life boom, and then a lot of the passionate diehards like us have stayed there. I would definitely encourage people to do exploring beyond those virtual worlds, because the newer ones, there's some really amazing things happening. They tend to be for a younger audience, but then again, we're educators, or you're educators, so platforms like Roblox, Rec Room, VR Chat, you're probably going to have more students that are actually users of them. Rec Room, for example, I didn't even know this until I talked to a developer there. Is you can do real-time programming within Rec Room, which is amazing. And that as a pedagogical tool for programming, that's really impressive. They're actually they're partnered with Apple. They're going to launch a Vision Pro soon. So that's an interesting one. VR Chat, like I mentioned, I'm every time I write about it, I'm blown away by the creativity there. Again, they don't default to human avatars. They have it's more anime or a lot of furries, the amount of creativity there is amazing. I wrote a few months ago on my blog, someone recreated Jorge Luis Borges' Library of Babel in VR chat. In other words, a totally infinite library of infinite books, and you can actually explore it infinitely, and the books are actually written. It's mind-blowing. I mean, as an education tool, I have to think that's something that's just incredibly promising. But there's lots of experiences like that. There's a whole community in VR chat because it's because a lot of people use VR. They've created a new sign language. They've created, based on American Sign Language, they've created a VR chat based sign language because the fingers are not fully articulate, the avatar fingers. So they created a new version that works in VR chat, and they're teaching it to each other and to other people that are supportive of the hearing impaired community, and that's just amazing. So there's a really promising ecosystem of virtual worlds springing up. So and also VR chat, there's one or two folks there that have a strong Second Life background. So I'd be more than glad to hook people up. So that's something to think about. Another thing, and this is something we can hopefully discuss in Q&A too, is I've been hoping to get more peer-reviewed studies on the power of virtual worlds as a pedagogic tool. I've been frustrated with this because I've talked to many educators who will say, okay, well, here's a cool virtual world education tool I'm using, or like a simulation or something. And they'll say, well, okay, but is that a better way of teaching people versus some other way, like a 3D model in the real world, or even a video? And I haven't gotten a good answer, and maybe I'm missing that, but I think we definitely need those. If those studies exist, they need more publicity. If they don't exist, we need to create them. Otherwise, we're going to keep hitting this stumbling block of people who are educators who are fans of virtual worlds, but we can't get the actual education, the university or the college hierarchy to support this, because it's like, okay, well, why would I spend money to get kids into this when we're not sure if it's actually going to be valuable? That's, VR actually has some of those, but again, VR has some of those barriers that I mentioned, like with gender, for example. So yeah, I think that's something to pursue, and hit me up if you know of any reports or if you're working on them, because I would love to help you out, promote them, and so on. And finally, to close on a positive note, Second Life is coming to mobile soon, and for educators, I think this is your bright, shining moment to really revive what we're doing here in conferences like this, because, especially for college-age students, 99% of them are going to prefer being on mobile. So if you can optimize education experiences in Second Life for Second Life's mobile app, that is going to be really promising. I think we'll have a chance to really give Second Life, okay, I'll say it, we'll give Second Life a Second Life in the educational realm, because that's going to be really promising. Well, I won't say if I've seen it or not, but I'll definitely say it's promising and really exciting. So yeah, keep your eyes on that, and I'm going to be blogging about it on my blog. But yeah, thank you so much. We'll start going to questions soon, but here's all my links to follow me. And there's before I go, there's a special discount, and this is only for virtual world best practices in virtual world folks. If you go to wiley.com, go to my book, Making a Metaverse That Matters, and you put in that code, VWBPE, you'll get a 35% off the hardcover. And I am more than happy to autograph. I'll write an autograph plate and I'll send it to you anywhere in the world. I sent an autograph plate to someone in Costa Rica, and it took them 2 months to get it, but it did arrive. So more than happy to do that. But yeah, that's the discount code. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. Hopefully I haven't been talking too fast. But yeah, I would love to do some audience questions.
We had a lot of great comments, but it looks like we do have a question in there. So do you want to go ahead and take it?
Let's see. Where do I go?
Okay, I can just do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, if you could curate, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I have to ask, is in Myth 3, you mentioned that people who are usually interested in metaverse platforms are usually gamers. I have to ask, as someone who years ago came from active worlds, we had a sizable older population, which sadly some of which are no longer amongst us. What would you say explains their presence in the metaverse among what they are usually generally as tech-literate age range? How they may have managed to overcome such brazenly new experiences, be they back then in AW or now in Second Life or even on newer platforms?
Well, with Active Worlds, they had a snow crash experience. I think it actually transitioned from Active Worlds to Second Life. People can correct me, but that launch kind of it brought a lot of kind of very early metaverse fans. I mean, I recall when it launched. So there's people who are not gamers per se, but excited by the concept of that being the next generation of the internet. And that's true with Second Life too. There's a decent proportion of the Second Life active user community that are not necessarily gamers beyond Second Life, but we're excited about it as a concept. So, but I think Active Worlds at peak was about 100,000 people. So it really didn't get into the millions like we're seeing now. But yeah, I mean, there's a passionate group. I would say just embrace the fact there are gamers there, and that's the much larger community, and they are they're proven to be interested in education-like experiences. I mean, I'm actually working on a VR game that has kind of an educational component, but that's the last thing you say about it is education, because unless they have to take it for class, they're not going to experience it. But if it's a cool, interesting experience that happens to be educational, I think that's a really great sweet spot.
Excellent, thank you. We did have one other question. Oh, here comes another one. But let me just give you this one, and then we can come back to theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was on my clipboard, I guess. On the topic of interoperability, do you see the possibility of a third-party asset host to act as a bridge between various worlds? By example, our avatars, swords, cars, etc., not hosted by the same companies that host the worlds.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen some projects. There's a Unity-related one. I think it's still secret, but there's one that would bridge multiple virtual worlds. So it would, in theory, work with virtual worlds that use the same protocols that are based in Unity. So there is some attempt to develop this. It's the main problem is the companies who have the larger user bases, like your Robloxes and like your VRChat. VRChat might be into it. Most of them, though, are probably going to hesitate because they tend to. That's how they make money, is if they lock in the content. I mean, I think we could see that eventually. I guess the question is, like I bring up, like how valuable would that actually be, especially because going across platforms, you're probably going to have at least some content is not going to fully optimize. It'll be like kind of passing out a Xerox photo. Like it'll be sort of the same, but not quite. So, but like I said, there are some projects in the works. I worked on one of them that hasn't been announced yet, but yeah, keep your eyes peeled.
Excellent, thank you. And then we had someone early on ask, just said, SL's economy is stronger than Bitcoin? Maybe they want you to expand on that. So,
in terms of people who use a virtual currency to buy and sell goods and services, Second Life's is used, like transactions, it's probably about, let's see, daily users is about 250,000 or so. So assume there's 1 to 2 transactions. So that's already at least 500,000, probably a lot more. Linden Lab used to publish economic figures, but they don't anymore, but I wish they did. but yeah, it's probably at least 500,000. Bitcoin transactions, you just Google Bitcoin transactions, it's almost always been under 500,000. Like very few people use it to buy goods and services. And when they do, it's not within the kind of official economy. It's it's like someone on the internet said, well, it's sort of like solving Sudoku, and then when you solve Sudoku, you get to buy heroin, because most of what the goods and services purchased through Bitcoin are in the illicit economy. But this constantly gets confused by the press. Actually, Bitcoin hit a all-time high in terms of what a Bitcoin was. It was like 65,000 US dollars. But I don't know. That's sort of like saying, that's sort of like reporting the value of baseball cards. Like, you know, like a Babe Ruth baseball card is worth $100,000. It's like, okay, there's a small amount of people who find baseball cards and Bitcoin valuable, and they will bid quite a lot, but it's rarely used for goods and services. We saw that in El Salvador, actually. Bukele, the prime minister of El Salvador, he did a big launch to make El Salvador transition to Bitcoin, and it totally failed. Like he gave people an app, and they could get free Bitcoin. But what they did is they just immediately turned it into US dollars. So it's sort of again, missing a philosophical distinction. Really, part of why US dollars are valuable is there's a thriving economy of 330 million people in it. And also, you know, there's a large military presence that's supporting a global economic network of partners and member states across the world, and that's why the US dollar is valuable, and that's why it's the main currency. And Bitcoin has none of that. And again, it hasn't even succeeded as a virtual currency within the niche of people who own it. So yeah, Second Life is succeeding much more in terms of an actual economic or a currency-driven or driving an actual economy.
Thank you. We have just about time for two more, and I'm so sorry I'm losing. Now they're starting to come in. This one came a little earlier as well. I'm curious how VR could potentially be applied to the classroom, like Quest 3s in the gym or something like that, or seated mode at desks. Do you happen to have something you'd like to share?
Well, it should, you know, like for starters, it should be an option, so people don't have to do it. Like I mentioned, you're going to have a large amount of people just get too nauseous in VR. But the thing is, like I've said, I've seen some really unique use cases for education, like for training. Yeah, like you mentioned, you probably you want to have a camera that doesn't move, because if you have simulated motion, you know, like if your virtual view is moving, like you're on a car or you're flying or something, but you yourself are standing, that can cause already more immersion, or I'm sorry, more motion sickness, because you're immersed, but your brain motor function gets kind of confused. So you want to maybe do it seated or standing in one place. Like if you look at the big VR games that are actually popular, and they also tend to be popular people in across genders, at least for people who like VR, it's like, say, Beat Saber is one, like where you're actually just standing in one place and you're just moving your arms, but you're not like moving. So yeah, arrest the camera. But yeah, really, less is more. Like I would make even do it like you're seated and only you have to move your hands within the virtual space, and maybe keep it that. Like I see so many educational applications where you have to stand up and you have to walk around, and it's really, I mean, all of that is very complicated, and I've done VR demos, and believe me, I mean, just even setting them up to get into it is like strapping someone into, you know, like a very complicated device. So yeah, work on, I'd say, just hand motions and a singular seated position, and see how that works. How are we doing? Any other questions?
Need my speak button on. I apologize. We are at the end of our time, and I just really want to thank our audience so much, because you've been a great audience. There were fabulous comments flying. We missed just a couple of questions, and we apologize for that. Thank you for giving us so much to think about, James.
Thank you.
We have
and I should add, just real quick, if I missed any question, feel free to go to my blog, because this talk is right on the top. You can just post a question, and I'll try to get to it whenever I can. But yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. And thank you for our transcriptionists, our wonderful audience, and we are at the end of our presentation.
Thank you all.
We hope. Lots of claps. Thank you. We hope you've had a great first day at the conference so far. I want to remind everyone to check the program often. And next we will have music. Let me just put that in. We will have music with F&J, brought to you by our amazing social committee, starting at 5 p.m. at the Social Wetlands Visitor Center. We have a full day of great events tomorrow, and thank you again. We'll see you in the Metaverse.